you know, it's hard. It's
Mhm.
no one said doing this is easy. It's hard, and there's not necessarily a roadmap. This is why when I talk to people, I tell them, like you have to think big picture here, and you have to see yourself within a larger structure, right? So the way your life turns out, and I should say the way your life has turned out up to this point is partly due to the larger structure that you find yourself in, a society, a culture, an economic framework, a political framework. All of these things influence how we turn out. So it's not totally up to you, right? I mean, so you didn't choose what your native language was, for example. That wasn't up to you, right? You don't choose who your family is up to this point, right? And but all those things influence you, and so there are things that influence your life that you have no control over, and that's going to happen until you die. There are some things you just can't control. You can cope and you can deal with, but you don't necessarily control. And then there are things that you can control, right? So you can't control the fact that you are in a free market capitalist society in the United States where the two dominant political parties are at such odds with each other that it's having a certain type of impact socially, politically, and economically, right? That's beyond your control. But all of that influences part of what is happening to you, and part of what it happens to us is we grow up with stories about how you should be, who you should be, what you should be, right? You need to do this or you need to do that, or look at this family member who did this. Why can't you be like that? Or um, you know you're supposed to graduate high school, then go to college, then get a job, and so on. Or and then you're supposed to get married and have 2.4 children, and you know and you don't have control over whether you hear those stories or not. You don't have control over whether or not, though, growing up in those circumstances have any impact on you. What you can control is recognizing what those stories are that you've heard. What's affecting you? Like, what are you so when you're sitting here telling me, you're having these thoughts and thinking about the future and so on, what you do have control over is thinking about what are you reacting to? Like, why are you feeling that way? Is it because of one of these stories that I'm talking about, that you don't even you don't even think about, because it's such a part of who you are, that that you're that you're not even aware that there's this effect on you, and that's what you're reacting to. So what you can do is you can start to think about what stories, or some people will say narratives, right? What stories are you operating on, that when you're feeling this way, that you feel like things aren't going right, or like you said earlier, like there's this emptiness in you. What is that a reaction to? What hold on, I'm having trouble saying this. In other words, when you're feeling that way, say empty on the inside, ask yourself, is there something that you think you should be doing that's supposed to fill that, so you don't feel that way, such that if you had this thing or were doing this other thing, that you wouldn't feel that way? And then ask yourself, is that one of those stories that you've been told, that you've grown up with your whole life, that you feel like you're missing out on? and that's why you might be feeling, say, empty, and or like something's missing, right? So that you do have control over. You have control over analyzing those stories that we grow up with. You don't have control over whether or not they're a part of you. You you couldn't help that. That's just how you found yourself, right? But ask yourself, what stories are beneath the surface that are sort of silently motivating you? And then ask, when you're feeling that way, what are you reacting to? Which of those stories are you reacting to that you feel that way? So, for example, maybe one of the stories you grew up with is that you go to America, and you go to America because it's a land of opportunities, but in order to take advantage of that, you have to study, and you need to study either medicine or law or business, right? And you do that, and then you're supposed to get a job, and you're supposed to find someone to be in love with and be married and have children, right? And that's a very common story. The problem with that story is it it doesn't necessarily include you, right? It doesn't necessarily include, well, what does Mel want, as opposed to what is Mel supposed to do. These stories are about what you're supposed to do. What they're stories about, they're stories that define happiness for us, rather than have you explore who you are, your interests, your goals, and have a life centered around what you think is important, not what other people think is important. And so I don't know in your case, and again, we can talk about this, but maybe it's something like that you're operating on one of these stories that you've never really questioned before, or maybe you didn't even realize was there, like the story I just told you. And then it would become your responsibility to say, okay, whose life is this anyway? Who's responsible for this? Why do I have to do these things in order to feel this way? Why couldn't I do these things over here in order to feel this way? You see what I mean?